air I breathe is shaking. That's how powerful that engine is. So the first vehicle in the show is not going to be a tank, and maybe you caught it in that little parade, but it's a very important vehicle in telling the story of the mechanization of military. And it happens to be the old, in a very similar way to those who fought in the century before. Of course, the cannons got a little bigger, and muskets were replaced with rifles, uniforms were updated, but wars were very much fought the same way hundreds of years. And that changed during the First World War, or the Great War. It was the first time when, in the early 20th century, where mechanization automobiles were starting to have an effect on the battlefield. And what we see here in the 1950s, it's over 100 years old this month, a 1915 Model T Ford. And you can see on the door there, it says WD, that's for wood. Now, unlike in the Second World War and conflicts later, when there was a lot more mechanization than militaries, we were just starting mechanization in the First World War. The vast majority of soldiers marched to the battlefield. All the equipment, the guns, the food, the ammunition was drawn by horses. So that began to change in 1914. Now, the British had a great need to move a lot of logistics. Now, this vehicle, it's a truck, and you think, well, it's very light, it's very small, but notice how this Ford glides easily over this tank arena. Massive main battle tanks, just like put rivets and destroying puddles, but the vehicle so light that they can easily this type of terrain. Now, obviously, the Model T Ford was invented in the United States, and Henry Ford, believe it or not, he was very isolationist. He was an American isolationist. He didn't want to have anything to do with that European war, and also he was very anti-British. However, he had licensed the production of many of his automobiles and trucks to different countries around the world, and one of them was Canada. In two different provinces in Canada, we were producing Model T Fords. And when the war broke out in 1914, we started selling those to our allies in Europe. So did Australia. So by 1917, when the United States finally got involved in the First World War, the British had amassed over 60,000 Model T Ford and variants. So what we see here is a logistics vehicle. They just took civilian models and painted them green. In some cases, they didn't even paint the vehicles if they were using them for staff cars or other behind the scenes uses. But this vehicle obviously wouldn't be traversing trenches. And tanks were born out of the First World War, but many people don't know about the importance of the automobile trucks, especially the Model T Ford, in the mechanization of forces in World War I. Canada sent over 14,000 of these vehicles to France and Great Britain, and they served in huge numbers. By the end of the war, Great Britain had over 140,000 Model Ts in service all over the world, in the Middle East, in North Africa, and of course behind the Western Front. The most famous Model T Ford is the Model T Ford ambulance. You can see an example of that in the Military Vehicle Conservation Center. So, very light, very quick, has wooden spokes, and once again, it's just a civilian model that is used for military purposes. Now notice that on this Model T, when it goes around again, it has doors on either side. At this period, Ford was a master of mass production and also of making these vehicles inexpensive and affordable for the population. Because the wheel is so close to the one side, that door is useless. The driver can't come out of that door. But on Canadian models, they were made with doors on both sides because we were exporting them to some of our allies who drive on the other side of the road. So in production, they just had to move the steering column from one side of the vehicle to the other. So here we have Frank. He's been a member of the Ontario Regiment Museum for decades, well over 3 decades, I believe. And he's looking after our Model T collection, the 2 vehicles. He is a volunteer and our operator today. So let's hear it for Frank and the Model T Ford. In 1918, when the United States Army landed in France and got involved in the Great War, they were one of the first. Thanks, Frank. They were one of the first almost mechanized forces. It wasn't until the Second World War that we would see a fully mechanized military in the 1980s. So we're going to skip way ahead and look at an evolution of another type of vehicle. Before the show, or maybe after the show, you may have even had the opportunity to ride in one of these here at our ride station. Oh, Frank's going to take the Model T around one more time. Not exceptionally fast, but even in these conditions, I wonder how many of you would like to take your car or SUV out to the stag station, right? You might even get stuck. But here we can just see the Model T effortlessly glides around. It's small, but it's always amazing to me when I see something in motion like that, and to think that it's over a century old. And still running. Okay, now we're going to see a tracked vehicle. The next series of vehicles are tracked and they're armored, but they're not tanks, and I'm going to tell you why. And this is one of the vehicles that you can see at our ride station. We actually get rides in these during our events. This is an M113 APC, or Armored Personnel Carrier. It doesn't have a main weapon. There is a mount on top with a crew commander that you can see and just in time for the Vietnam War, and the United States Army deployed these to Vietnam, and they were instantly a hit with the Allied troops there. They gave some protection to the crew, mostly from artillery shrapnel and small arms. They couldn't take a direct hit from a tank or an artillery piece, but going into the battlefield and coming out of the battlefield, they gave troops some protection. Behind the crew commander, you see a very large hat. We call that the family hat. And in this on the front of the vehicle, this is very interesting. You see that big piece of wood? That's actually a bow plate. And this vehicle was designed, it's very light, it's aluminum armor. It can propel itself through water. It's actually an amphibious vehicle as well. And in Southeast Asia, in the Vietnam conflict and other conflicts of that period, in the 1960s, 70s, it was perfect for those conditions. Rice paddies, rivers to cross. It gave the crew some protection and could push through water and swamps. At the back of the vehicle, there's actually a ramp that drops down. The is an armored door, but that ramp can drop down, and that section of troops can quickly get out of the vehicle and back into the vehicle. This is the most common military vehicle used by NATO and Western nations. So many of these were produced. Canada, Australia, all the NATO members, except for the British, because they always like to make their own version, use the M113. And even though it came out in 1960, it's still in service to this day. The M113A1, like you see it here, marked up like the United States and Vietnam, is still in conflict and helps the Ukraine. Now let's look at the next evolution in the M113. So it came out in 1960. What is it, 2024? That's a very long service for these vehicles. But we didn't just always use them the way they were built in 1960. Over time, lessons from the battlefield and new technologies allowed them to evolve. And what we see here looks very similar, but it is an M113A. Added a spall liner or additional armor inside the vehicle. Now, what is spall? When an armored shell hits an armored plate, it's not often the shell that causes damage to people inside. The armor plate itself shatters. And you can imagine inside this box, hot pieces of metal bouncing around inside. It's very nasty. So what the technology they came up with was a spall liner. It's a Kevlar liner. So that when it falls, that hot armor that's breaking up, it doesn't hurt the crew inside. Hopefully it's captured by that spall liner, that Kevlar liner inside the vehicle. So although the actual armor on the vehicle is not thicker, the crew inside is much safer. On the back of the vehicle, you can also see it has an additional fuel tank. It's in the track. The original vehicle, like a tank, has individual track shoes. It's a steel track. It's put together by pins. A Canadian company out of Quebec known as Susi developed the military Susi track. So when this vehicle moves, when I move all these vehicles together, notice that this has a clickety-clack that you could probably hear from across the field. And this vehicle makes very little noise. So it has a rubber track, it's much wider. It has greater handling of roads, it doesn't damage roads. If you were to deploy into Europe or North America, you're not tearing up the roads with your M113. And that track has a 400% lifespan over the original 1960s and 1970s tracks. So this particular vehicle is known as the TLAV conversions in Canada, tracked light armored vehicle. And when the Canadian troops were deployed to Afghanistan, they were sent with the M113A2s, the extended fuel tanks and small liners, but they actually did the track conversion in the field. And when they came back after the conflict, they had the new CC track. But that wasn't the end of the story for the M113. the crew protection, they improve the range, they improve the track, but the engine and other components are pretty much the same. 21st century, the United States and Canada, those three countries used it, had forces deployed in Afghanistan. They needed a vehicle, the old one didn't. So the Q-Lab has an upgraded engine, way it also just to their armored hulls, and believe it or not, they cut them in half, and they stretched the M113. Count the road wheels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the regular 113 just has 5 road wheels. So the vehicle is longer, it can carry more troops inside, and it also has a turret. That turret, like a tank, can turn 360 degrees. It has 8 smoke grenade launchers on there. And why a smoke grenade launcher? Because if you are given, it can fully pivot like a tank. So, like a same vehicle, the same concept, but from mid-20th to early 21st century technology. You can imagine that first M113. Okay, let's look at another generation of armored vehicles. And these are armored vehicles. Again, they're not tanks. But they don't have track, they're wheels. In the mid-1970s, Canada was looking at its military capability and not only the track vehicles, but it was looking for something that's a quick deployment switch. It's a wrong solution. So Canada looked to a Swiss company called MOWAG and got a license on the design. And Canada had never built these things. And it was actually General Motors Diesel Division, or Canada General Motors Defense, that got the contract to design a light armored vehicle. This is what they came up with. So it's much faster than a track vehicle. It's a six-wheel vehicle. They first came into service in 1978. This is the AVGP, or Armored Vehicle General Purpose. Recognize this vehicle. it is an eight-wheel vehicle rather than a six-wheel vehicle. It's more heavily armored and has a much larger turret. It has a small turret, almost like a small tank. Definitely with a good infantry support with a 25 millimeter main weapon. Very quick. And can be deployed in all stripped it down and rebuilt it. And this is one of those examples. This lab 3 you see coming around was built in 1998, but then went back into the factory and came out in 2008. And this is the lab 3 much heavier than the last three and has technology that was developed from the unfortunate lessons of the first few years of the Afghanistan conflict. Basic on this, many soldiers were killed due to roadside bombs and IEDs. So they developed the last three to look. We want to look at So unlike the lab 3, it doesn't have an armor. Just because it's tracked, just because it has a weapon on it, doesn't make it a tank. As you know now, they're armored personnel carriers and other roles for those armored vehicles. But now let's look at actual tanks. Here we see the iconic M4 I think when people ponder in their mind, to say the word tank with your eyes closed, you probably see the Sherman. It's so iconic here in the West. It came in many, many variants, including model from 1945 of the Sherman tank. And as you can see, for an old girl who's born in 1945, this tank can really move. In the Second World War, there was a concept of a light tank, a medium tank, and a heavy tank. And you can see some of those examples in the museum. The Sherman was a medium tank. It was meant for infantry and to fight other medium tanks. This particular model of tank, including this one here, Bart, were made famous by the 2014 movie Fury with Brad Pitt. The same sort of tank that Brad Pitt was using in that film. Now the Sherman was made, they were built in the United States, but a lot of them had Canadian components. The United States and Canada had a joint war effort, war production. But in 1977, Canada was looking, in the 1950s, Canada was looking for a replacement for Sherman. And in 1945, we learned the lessons of the Second World War. The British were trying to come out with a tank that would be bigger and better than the Tiger and the Panther, the German super tanks of the Second World War. And what they came up with was the Centurion, but they came up with it too late. It never got to the battlefield in 1945. And once again, the concept is, imagine if this was designed to fight the Tiger. It has the heaviest armor. It has a These were British tanks, and they came out in the 1950s. They replaced Canada's Shermans. They also replaced vehicles for Australia and many other countries around the world. The Centurion is the most battle-tested main battle tank in world history. Variants of the Centurion are still in service today, even though it's a 1960 tank. It serves in Korea, it serves in Vietnam, it serves in conflict over the Middle East. It is much heavier. And these were served with the Canadian Armed Forces up until 1977, when Canada had a brigade of tanks stationed in Europe. This is what we know as we get to the finale, we have a knockout finale. Trust me, it's going to be fast, it's going to be loud. They're going to take all of the vehicles, and we're going to do a parade. Now that you know what they are, great time. I'm going to stop talking. Great time to get some video, some photos. The Americans were also developing a main battle tank, and this is the M60A3 MBT. Here it has a nickname, it's known as Grumpy. Send out the Challenger. Now, I told you about the Leopard and how quick it was, but you'll get to see it in action now. Up against this American monster of a tank will be Leopard 1. So they're both still currently in service in many countries around the world, even though they're slightly older tanks. Here we have the American M60 main battle tank. Come on, Brendan, show off your gun. There's Brendan up there. It's a crew commander. Like I said, 105 millimeter main weapon. So it has the same gun as the Leopard. So they are equal in firepower. No gun is larger than the enemy's. Each of them has the same bark. So a hit is a hit. And down here, deep inside the tank, under this massive amount of armor, we have Pete Cocker. He's a longtime volunteer. You can't see him because he's looking through those vision blocks. So the M60, however, look at the frontal armor on this tank. It is massive. It's one of the most heavily armored front glacis plates of any main battle tank of the 20th century. So even 105 millimeter round into the front of the M60 is not going to penetrate this tank. That is the strength of the M60. The Leopard is very well armored. Its strongest armor is also at the front, but you know, 1 or 2 rounds could actually penetrate into the front of the Leopard. The Leopard's strength is not its frontal armor, it's its speed. At weighing over 50 tons, the M60 kind of lumbers. It's heavily armored and slow. The Leopard at just over 40 tons has the same punch, less effort, and thus is much faster on the battlefield. So the Leopard will have to try to use its speed and the guile of the crew to outmaneuver the M60 and get shots in the engine compartment at the back or decent shots on the side of the tank of the M60. Whereas the M60, almost any direct shot on the Leopard could penetrate its armor. So they are actually quite equal, but in different strengths. So how does this work? I'm gonna definitely get out of this tank arena because it will not be safe here. This is gonna be loud. It's simulated fire through their main weapons. They are gonna go to their firing positions. I'm gonna tell them to start Battle Royale. It's unscripted. The crews are actually trying to defeat each other. They're highly trained, but they're using the strengths of their tank, the weaknesses of the enemy tank, to get as many direct hits as possible in a short period of time. Now, pay attention to who's firing, where they're firing, and when you think there's a hit. Because at the end of the segment, I'm bringing them back. And it's you who's going to decide which tank and which crew wins World of Tanks Battle Royale. Does that sound fun? Yeah! Does that sound like one heck of a finale to Tank Saturday? Okay, I better get to safety. Main battle tanks, take your starting positions. He's in a great position, already aiming at the Leopard. Notice the M60 has their side towards the Leopard, but it's protected by that hill. First shot by the M60. Leopard didn't like that. Returning fire. M60 slowly moving towards the Leopard's position. Leopard using its speed to move to a new position. Good shot by the Leopard, but most of the armor of the M60 was behind that hill. Leopard's not taking a firing position. He's actually moving up on the M60. Notice how the Leopard is using that hill from the M60's position. The lower part of the Leopard's armor cannot be hit. Return fire by the Leopard. Oh, the M60's engine is exposed. Can the Leopard get off a shot? firing position? No. Look at this, the M60 spinning its frontal armor towards the enemy. It's almost like just try me, Leopard. Leopard start, that would have been a hit by the M60 on the Leopard. M60 definitely had the advantage there, but now the Leopard's speed leaves the M60 with its engine exposed. Get Leopard crew, get a shot into that engine deck. Bam, great shot by the Leopard. Leopard crew doing a good job tracking that target. Notice they can turn their turrets all the way around, but when they put their gun over the engine deck, they don't have the right depression to get on target. Leopard in a great position. Look at that hill. M60 having none of it, firing on the move. Strong frontal armor towards the Leopard. Leopard decides to run. And then we'll bring them back to center. Leopard quickly into a firing position. Leopard absolutely charging. What will the M60 do? Both of them are in a great firing position. Their lower hulls protected by the hill. Tanks, let's return to center, return to center.
But the Leopard immobilized the M60 extremely well by hitting the engine deck. Shots are going. Yeah.
Leopard's just gonna go down to there.
I'm still gonna go M60. I'm still gonna go Leopard.
So once again, that's something that you won't see in any other tank in the world. Is a simulated tank battle. Okay, so this is where the power goes from the tank crews to the audience. Based on what you've learned today and the rules of Battle Royale, you have to decide which crew, which tank. Don't vote for your favorite tank. Which crew do you think outfought, outsmarted, outwitted, and used the characteristics of their vehicle better than the other crew? So you're voting for the crew and how they fought in Battle Royale. Are you guys ready for this?
Yeah.
Here we got our crews out. You can see their smiling faces. If you believe that the M60 crew won Battle Royale with hoots, hollers, clapping, and shouts, let them know.
I've had a decision.
If you believe that the Leopard crew won Battle Royale with hoots and hollers and shouts and cheering? Let them know. Okay, wait a minute.
Head.
One more time. M60?
Why are you
Leopard.
What the hell are you doing?
Congratulations, Leopard crew. You've won the first Battle Royale of 2024. Now, I hope that you guys have had a great time, that you've learned a lot about military history, about tanks and armored vehicles, and we really hope that what you can do to help this museum, you could come back, but it's better to leave a review, tell a friend, put something on TripAdvisor, Google, or Facebook about the experience you had here today, and there's nowhere else in the world that you can experience tanks like this. So let's hear it for all the volunteers that put this together today one last time. So again, I'm Jeremy. I'm the Executive Director of the museum. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Check out the military encampments. Check out the museum displays in the military market. And I'll see you on the next one. Happy Saturday.